Welcome, everyone. I'm Jeff Schoenfeld, and I'm the lucky guy who gets to be the president of UJA-Federation of New York. And we're glad that you're all here to experience what I know will be a very special performance that will stay with you for a long time to come. Before we start the program, I want to acknowledge what I know is on all of our minds after seeing the scenes from Israel over the weekend. I know that you all join me in praying for calm and for peace in what is a very, very challenged moment. As you would expect, UJA was on the ground helping Israelis to cope with yet another round of violence. We are in all key conversations about supporting individuals and families experiencing loss and trauma, and we remain prepared to do all we need to do to support our friends in Israel. We are a people whose history and traditions have been carried forward by our oral history. Witness theater is just the latest extension of this tradition, and it's taken on increased importance in the current environment in which we are living, an environment with now 2 synagogue shootings in 6 months, an environment where anti-Semitism is unambiguously on the rise at home and overseas. It's never been more important for the voices, the words, the emotions, and these traumatic early life experiences we will hear tonight to be passed on to a younger generation who will make sure that these stories, these horrors, are never forgotten, and they remain enduring lessons to guide humanity in the future. Through programs like the one we'll experience together tonight, we're ensuring that we never forget what can happen when anti-Semitism is left to grow unchecked. We're passing on the lessons of the Holocaust to the next generation so that they will be empowered to stand up in the face of hatred. Witness theater is made possible through a unique partnership between Selfhelp Community Services and UJA-Federation of New York, and this year with the support of the Sephardic Home for the Aged Foundation. This year, Witness theater is taking place in 3 sites in New York, and performances will be seen by more than 4,200 audience members, with many more viewing the performances via live stream. Tonight, we're privileged to experience SAR's performance, which has brought together 10 students from SAR with 5 survivors served by Selfhelp. 2 days ago, that number was 7. 1 suffered a stroke and 1 is too ill to be with us tonight. It brings forward the urgency of having these stories told and the stories passed on to the next generation. Their diverse experiences during the war and their lives today will be shared on tonight's stage. This unique and essential program started in Israel by JDC-Eshel and was brought to New York 5 years ago by Selfhelp, the largest provider of services to survivors in North America and an organization significantly supported by UJA-Federation. Selfhelp's unparalleled, compassionate professionals often serve as a survivor's last living relative. By offering specialized, culturally sensitive care throughout the New York metropolitan area, Selfhelp ensures that survivors can live out their final days with meaning, dignity, and the warm embrace of community. We are proud to partner with Selfhelp. Before we see the performance, I want to share some information about Holocaust survivors in our community today. Many are often surprised to learn that there are still 40,000 survivors with us in New York. Unacceptably, nearly 40% are living in poverty. Many are living alone, and many are suffering from chronic illness and depression. UJA responds to these challenges through the Community Initiative for Holocaust Survivors, CIHS, which raises funds to provide survivors with compassionate care that addresses their unique needs. Through CIHS, we fund case management, mental health services, social programs that relieve isolation, legal services, and emergency financial assistance with Selfhelp and 10 other social service organizations. Many folks think that as the survivor population declines, the cost of providing care will decline as well, and that will be true, but not yet. The breadth and depth of services required by survivors to live in comfort, in safety, and with the dignity they deserve requires more funding, not less, for the next 5 years. That is why I would like everyone here tonight to consider making a gift to CIHS. There are pledge cards in your programs, and staff members will be near the doors at the back to take your cards after the performance is completed. I spent the first 15 years of my UJA volunteer journey deeply immersed in our human service work, and especially the work we do with survivors. I have seen the needs, I have touched the needs, I have helped plan for those needs, and I feel very privileged in my own life to be able to help fund those needs. I've made $1 million gift to UJA specifically to support CIHS, and I hope that everyone here tonight feels it in their heart to support this important initiative at whatever level you can. If not now, then when? And if not us, then who? Let us uphold our sacred community commitment to never forget. Thank you all. It's now my privilege to introduce Jessica Ash, a drama therapist who has worked with the students and survivors to create tonight's special performance. She will tell you more about what we're about to experience. Jessica.
Hello and welcome to tonight's performance. My name is Jessica Ash, and I am the director and drama therapist of SAR's Witness Theater. I want to thank Selfhelp, the UJA-SAR, for making this program happen for the last 5 years. And especially tonight, I want to thank my tech crew up there who has worked so hard for the last week, and especially today, to make this beautiful show. Witness Theater is an 8 to 9 month process where we bring together Holocaust survivors and a group of students. Using drama therapy techniques, the group builds trust and intimacy, so they eventually begin to share their personal stories of the Holocaust. This is a delicate process that requires the students to actively listen, learn how to hold very intense emotion when it occurs, and eventually be able to step into these roles. This program is not for every student. It's emotionally, mentally, and physically extremely demanding. However, because of the high demand, each student is transformed by the end, which I have had the honor of witnessing for the last 5 years. The most important aspect of Witness Theater is not the show that you are all about to see, but the relationships that have been fostered. There is nothing more powerful than the connections between the students and the survivors. Creating these connections takes time and patience. The students have worked so hard, and I am so proud of them. The word witness took on a whole new meaning for me this year, and I'm going to tell you why. Elaine Affon and Adele Green, 2 of our past survivors, passed away this year. When the student who played young Adele found out that Adele was hospitalized, she flew back home immediately, despite her parents and college professors expressing their disapproval. It was finals week, after all. The student said to me, "This is a simple decision. Adele is my best friend, and I must be with her. So she flew home, and she sat at Adele's bedside, holding her hand for the last few days of her life. I went to visit Adele a few days before her passing, and I witnessed this incredible bond between these two people. The student was bearing witness to Adele up into the very last moments of her life. There is no bigger gift than this, and I will never forget that moment. Before we begin, I want to share that two of our adults this year, Maurice Braunstein and Betty Bider, are unable to be with us tonight, as you heard. We are sending our love to them, and we are very honored to share their stories, even in their absence. So without further ado, I now present to you Witness Theater.
God Hannelore was born in 1929 in Worms, Germany. They say that anti-Semitism began in Worms before any other place in Germany.
Maybe this is because Worms has one of the longest histories of anti-Semitism. The presence of the Jewish people had been there since 1034, when Jews built their first cemetery. This makes that cemetery the oldest Jewish cemetery in all of Europe.
In 1096, during the First Crusade, there were accusations that Jews had caused the Great Plague, so they were forced into ghettos. It wasn't until 1801 that Jews could leave the ghettos and take up residence elsewhere in the city.
So when Hitler came into power, they knew the script. They dusted that anti-Semitism right off their shelves like no time had passed.
Worms had spent a lifetime mastering how to oppress and make Jews second-class citizens. Let's go back to Hannelore's story. 1933.
Hand over the keys to your car. Are you deaf? I said hand over those keys.
A few months later,
All the men must come with me.
Where are they going?
We need people to wash windows and pick up the trash. We thought you Jews would be great at those sort of things, considering you are trash.
and a few months after that,
I am here to inform you that you can no longer employ your maids, seamstress, or drivers.
What? But why not?
You Jews don't deserve to hire any help. Soon, you will become the help.
this is how you strip people of their humanity. You take away their basic rights, slowly.
We must leave Germany. I could see the writings on the walls. This is just the beginning.
We can't leave. I have my family and my friends here. This will blow over. They won't do anything to us. You fought in World War I. They wouldn't dare.
But then, a few months later, Hannelore's older brother, Irit, was at school.
Hey, why don't you try bathing for a change, you dirty Jew?
Yeah, doesn't your mother believe in soap?
I do bathe. Maybe you're the one that...
What? No, say it. You know, if I were to stick this knife in you right now, nobody would say a thing. Nothing would even happen to me.
Well, Irit came running home and told his parents what happened.
Mama, there was a kid at school who told me that I smelled, and when I tried to stand up for myself, he pulled out a knife and said that if he hurt me, then no one would even care. Is that true?
No, of course that's not true. That's absurd.
He was just being a bully. You're home now, and you're safe. He's not going to hurt you. I've had it. You're right. It's time to leave.
They left for Frankfurt, where they thought the anti-Semitism wouldn't be as bad. The plan was to stay in Frankfurt until they could leave Germany. So in 1933, when Hannelore was 4, they moved. They soon found out that anti-Semitism was growing like wildfire.
When we got to Frankfurt, I remember living next to the biggest Nazi.
Let me be clear about one thing. The next time you throw anything into my lawn, this is what's going to happen to you. Are we clear?
Hannelore, what's wrong?
Mama, I was playing with a ball in the backyard. You know how I play with it. And by mistake, I threw it into the neighbor's lawn. And then he got mad, and then he came over and...
Shh, my love, it's okay. You're home now, and you're safe. He's not going to hurt you.
But this was not the truth, and Hannelore's mother knew it. As time passed, the anti-Semitism continued to grow, and in 1935, it was decided that they would take a train to Switzerland. They would stay in Switzerland until they could go to Palestine.
My father left on the train the day before. He thought it wasn't safe for all of us to travel together. At the time, I'm not sure if I knew who these men were, but my mother sure did.
Hey, little girl, who's that?
That's my teddy bear. I named him Teddy.
You could have thought of a better name than Teddy. What's your name?
Eric.
Well, hello, Eric, and your name?
Hannelore.
Oh, what lovely names you guys have.
Hannelore's mother held her breath and hardly moved a muscle.
Would you guys like some chocolates?
Ma'am, can we offer your lovely children some chocolate?
Please, we love chocolates, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What lovely behaved Aryan children.
Yeah, nothing like those dirty Jewish children ruining Germany.
Where are you guys going to anyway?
We're going to meet our dad.
Time stopped for Hannelore's mother. Her heart felt it could explode out of her chest. Her palms were drenched. She spent the entire train ride imagining being caught and suffering the consequences that would lead her and her children to their death. All she could do was pray.
Well, this is our stop.
Bye. Thank you so much for the
You
chocolates.
guys enjoy seeing your father.
There are many almost moments in life, moments where your life flashes before you. Hannelore's mother was determined to not have any more of them.
We met with my father in Switzerland and stayed there for 2 months before heading to Palestine. We lived in Palestine for 2 years before coming to America, where my uncle sponsored us. We settled in America, where my brother joined the army, and then 2 years later, my mom's brothers joined us. I met my husband in 1948 at a dance in Manhattan. We had a wonderful life together, where we raised 2 wonderful daughters. Even though my family escaped Germany early, these early experiences still taught me that my life is precious and to never take anything for granted.
I consider myself very lucky to have left Germany at 6 years of age. My husband, Walter, also from Germany, was not able to leave until 1941. He miraculously escaped to Spain, where he lived for 5 years. We met in New York at a dance in Washington Heights and then got married. I have 2 daughters, 4 grandchildren, and 5 great-grandchildren. Walter worked his way up the corporate ladder to become an export manager for a large textile firm. I worked as an administrative assistant until my first daughter was born. Then I returned to work when the daughters became teenagers. Since my husband traveled frequently for work, I was often given the opportunity to join him. Together we traveled to many beautiful places all around the world. Some of the places included Japan, Hong Kong, Australia, Europe, and South Africa. Through the years, I have learned that life is fragile. We must cherish the good times and try to live each day to the fullest.
Gaston was born in Sousse, Tunisia in 1932. Tunisia is the smallest country in North Africa, bordering the Mediterranean Sea and the Sahara Desert.
I was one of 9 siblings. I had 5 older brothers and 3 sisters. One brother passed away early on, so then we were 8.
Gaston had 2 homes growing up, one in the old city near the Arabic market, and the other by the beach, which had more of a European feel. His father owned 2 restaurants and was also the gabbai of their shul.
I loved going to the beach. The sand was white, the waters were warm, and we played soccer all day long.
Hey, Gaston! Come on, Gaston. It's dinner time. You've been here all day.
Gemma was Gaston's older sister, and they were really close. Gaston had a wonderful childhood, filled with parents, siblings, and friends who loved each other very much. Arabic and Jewish culture infused the streets. The beautiful city of Sousse was Gaston's playground. However, at the end of 1941, this all changed.
One day, right before the war started, I was walking home from school, and in the distance, I saw 2 planes flying. I had never seen a plane before in my life. It looked like they were fighting in the sky. Mama, you'll never believe what I just saw. I was walking, and then I saw these 2 planes flying, and one shot the other down, then I saw the other plane. It was...
I think your imagination may have been playing tricks on you.
No, Mom, I saw it, really.
By the next day, it was confirmed that war had almost arrived.
Students, you see that submarine? That one is German, and the other boat is British, carrying oil for the artillery.
British submarine just shot down the German boat.
All of a sudden, the ocean was black. This was when the war officially started in Tunisia. Gaston was 10.
The entire city was decimated right before my eyes. Our home in the old city was destroyed. We had nowhere to go.
The Germans had moved in applying strict rules. They set a curfew, and all lights needed to be out at a certain time.
My cousin, who was pregnant at the time, was committed to lighting candles every Friday night, despite the rules.
Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kichanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Nazis, who had been patrolling the streets at this time, saw the light through the window. They threw a grenade into the home and killed Gaston's pregnant cousin.
At this point, Jewish stars were being handed out, and the entire city felt like a war zone. The Germans took everything we had. My sister was born in 1940, and we didn't even have a carriage for her. My mother had to carry her around in a bag with a Jewish star on it. Soon after, my brothers were taken to a labor camp. Days later, I went out looking for food.
But instead of finding food, Gaston stumbled upon a train carrying Jewish prisoners of war.
At this point, we had nowhere to go, but an Arab man whose daughter played with my sister offered to hide our family.
There's a barn in a town nearby. I can hide you and your family there. You'll be safe.
So my mother, father, and sisters and I hid out. Sometimes I would crawl up on the roof and watch the planes attack each other. I felt like I was in the movies. It was like a light show in the sky. But Mom, you should see this. It's like a battle in the sky.
I won't ask you again.
They hid out for a while until...
Germans are looking for Jews everywhere. I'm so sorry, but you must leave.
So they decided to travel to Moknin, where they would spend the remainder of the war. And finally, they went back to Sousse, and Gaston was reunited with his brothers, which was an incredible feeling. And in 1948, when the war broke out in Palestine, Gaston's older brothers went to fight.
In 1949, it was decided that my entire family would move to Israel. It was hard, but we managed, and I found work making shoes. And then in 1955, I had finally decided that it was my time.
Gaston fought in the 1956 war in Israel. He worked alongside Ariel Sharon, fighting for what he believed in.
After the war, Gaston didn't want to go back to just making shoes, so he traveled the world on a luxury cruise line, working every job imaginable on that boat. And in 1968, he met a woman on board who he fell in love with. They got married, moved to America, and had 2 children and 3 grandchildren who have attended SAR High School.
Things have come full circle for Gaston. He now does the same jobs his father used to do in Sousse. He is the Gabbai of the Shul Emerslide Silalyot. This makes him feel connected to his father and connected to everything his family fought for and instilled in him.
There was no future in our family in Tunisia. We left 1949, just our clothes on our back. I emigrated to Israel. I proudly served in the Israeli military as a paratrooper in the war 1956. I met the love of my life, Anne Friedman, an American who I married in 1968. We settled in New York, where I still live today. I have 2 wonderful sons and 3 grandchildren. We must live in society free of hate and anti-Semitic and form of racism. We must always remember the victim of the Holocaust, our 6 million brothers and sisters, and make sure that history does not repeat itself. The most important lesson on the Holocaust is that we must support the state of Israel and all costs. Am Israel Chai. Amen.
It's hard to let go. It's hard to move on. Even though you want to. The past is heavy, and it weighs on you, like bricks being stacked. It continues to haunt you, like a shadow following you around. And the moment you feel free of it, its presence is back. And it gently reminds you that it's not going anywhere.
This is what it feels like to pass down generational trauma. It lives in a place where there are no words. It lives in our bodies. And we can spend our entire lives carrying it around.
My mother was pregnant with me before the war had begun in Soviet Russia. So all my earliest memories were the ones that she told me.
We were living in Moscow. I had just almost finished graduate school. I was getting ready to defend my dissertation. I was pregnant with you, when all of a sudden, Hitler broke his pact with Stalin. Your grandfather and I left for Sverdlovsk in 1941.
I come from a family of brilliant people. My grandfather was a well-known doctor, a dermatologist, and my mother was a biochemist. She was one of the people who helped develop vitamin C.
Your father had been taken to the special forces on the outskirts of Moscow earlier in the war.
My father was originally from Poland. He and his family fled the pogroms and came to Moscow. It would turn out that my father would spend his entire life fleeing from persecution.
During the war, Anna's mother got a job as the head of a chemistry lab at a bread factory. But she would always say,
"Can you believe I work at a bread factory but can hardly bring home any bread?"
To ensure that the employees weren't stealing food, they'd be patted down daily. Anna's mother needed to feed Anna, so she would take the alcohol that was given out, disguise herself in big clothes, and quietly trade the alcohol for bread at the flea market. If she had been caught, she would have been fired and arrested.
When you were 2.5, we went back to Moscow. You had pneumonia a few weeks before our departure, but we couldn't exchange our tickets. You were so sick during that journey. We were all sick and malnourished during those years.
When they went back to Moscow, there were no men anywhere. They had all gone to fight. 1.5 years later, Anna's father returned, but had completely transformed. He went from being a man with many friends who sang often to always being worried and anxious and sick.
In life, there's no going back. Once you learn something, it becomes hard to unlearn it. My father learned things during his time in the Special Forces that would keep him closed off and paranoid for the rest of his life. It's like he was locked away.
In 1946, Anna's brother Isaac was born, which brought a lot of love and happiness into her life. However, it continued to be a dark time.
I became good friends with a girl named Galina who was in my class. All she wanted was for her father to return. For years, she waited, and I waited with her. Papa, I'm going to Galina's now. Papa?
Galina's? Are you going alone?
Yes, I always do. It's just on the street.
Don't talk to anyone, no matter what. You never know.
You never know what.
Who's listening?
Hi, Galina. What are you doing?
Just waiting. Waiting for my dad to come home.
Galina's father had gone to war, and even though the war was over, her father had not returned. There was no confirmation of his death, so she spent years waiting.
I'm sure he'll return soon.
You think so?
Absolutely. Maybe he's just lost. He just doesn't know how to get back home.
Yeah, maybe that's it. You're so lucky your father's home.
There are many ways to take a man. And even though the war didn't physically take Anna's father's life, it did take his spirit. He would become sick often, paralyzed with worry and fear. He died when Anna was 27.
Up until Stalin's death, we felt like prisoners. He ruled with an iron fist. We were all made to feel paranoid. Our teachers told us that if we got in trouble at school, our parents would pay. Parents even hesitated to attend children's birthday parties.
What if there are spies there, disguised as other parents?
What if there's a recording device inside the cake?
Or inside the gifts.
What if the cake is poison?
This is not how life is meant to be lived. We are afraid of everything.
This is what dictators do. Build fear in order to gain control. They plant the seeds of distrust and watch them grow. You couldn't help but be paranoid. Then, in 1953, Stalin died.
It was the first moment of calmness I had ever experienced. As I grew up, things continued to be hard. I eventually married and had 2 sons. In 1979, we applied to leave Russia, but we were denied. I felt so defeated. It was only 10 years later that I received the push I needed to apply again. And this time, it worked. I still carry fear in my life. I wish I didn't. Anna wants to free herself of this, and we want this for her also. So we help recreate moments of peace, joy, and relaxation with Anna. Most of all, we show her how much she is loved and how lucky we are to have met her.
When we all watch the episodes of my former life that our sweet girls and boys are playing so naturally and truthfully, everyone could easily realize how hard it was to live in Soviet Russia, especially after the war and under the Stalin's regime. But no matter how hard it was, I always never was losing the hope about better life for my family, especially for my boys. Finally, after 2 attempts and more than 10 years of uncertainty and almost hopelessness, we received permission to immigrate to the United States. We found ourselves in kind of shock, which was not easy to overcome. We did it with the help of our good friends who stayed by us and support us all the time we needed them. We were extremely happy to enter the new land and a new country. We recognized right away that the fresh breeze that was blowing from the land and was so easy to inhale was the breeze of freedom and democracy. We brought our hunger of freedom and democracy to succeed with us. Eventually, my husband and I found jobs, and our boys went through schools and colleges and started new careers. It took us time and hard effort, but this light breeze of freedom and democracy and the hope of a bright future for our kids gave us strength and energy to succeed.
Belgium, 1927. Bluma, who would soon become Bertha, who would later become Betty, was born. Bluma was her birth name, which means flower in Yiddish.
Later, I would change it to Bertha, which sounded more French, and then Betty when I got to America.
But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Betty's father was from Poland, and her mother was from the Ukraine. Betty also had a younger sister named Clara. Her parents didn't have the best marriage, but divorce wasn't allowed in Belgium, so they accepted their reality.
I had a special bond with my father. We were both playful and silly and didn't take life too seriously.
Betty's childhood was filled with wonderful memories of going to the beaches, spas, experiencing the opera, and going to see Laurel and Hardy movies. Betty and her father both had big personalities and wanted to live life to the fullest.
Not everybody understood this, but we sure did. And that's what made our relationship so special. My father taught me how to be my own person, even as a girl in the 1930s.
Life felt normal until August of 1940, when they heard on the radio that Germany would invade Belgium.
Pack as quick as you can. We're taking the next train to France.
We got on the train with lots of other Jewish refugees. We made it to the south of France with hopes of entering Spain, but the Spanish leader, Franco, wouldn't allow it.
So Betty and her family stayed in Toulouse for 6 months. The French government put the family into a Catholic preacher's home with other refugees.
6 months later, we thought things had calmed down, so we went back to Belgium. We were not prepared for what we saw.
My watch.
Our furniture.
My doll.
My clothes.
Our curtains.
Our dishes.
My stuffed animals.
My jewelry.
All of it gone. Not one item left. So Betty and her family moved into another apartment for a few months. But Belgium continued to be occupied, and nothing had really gotten better.
So, once again, we left Belgium. This time we stayed in the Limon Vichy part of France. We lived in a big house with lots of other French refugees. Everything was fine until August 27th, 1942. We were woken up at 2 a.m. to loud banging.
Everybody up and get yourself into a single file line. If your name is on this list, you will come with us. Schwartz. Blumenstein. Cohen. Frankel. Bergman.
Excuse me, sir. There must be some kind of mistake. You see, I fought in World War I. I defended this country.
Fine. You could stay. Rest of you, come with me.
Betty's father had lied about fighting in World War I, but it kept him from being taken that time. Luckily, Betty, her mom, and sister had a different last name than her father. For whatever reason, Wolfson wasn't on the list. The resistance moved their family to hide on a farm for the next 2 years, but eventually, Betty's father was taken.
Bergman. Let's go.
After this, Betty's sister was moved to hide out in a convent on the border of Switzerland. Betty and her mother remained on the farm for the rest of the war.
One day in 1945, I was walking down the street and saw an empty pack of American cigarettes and realized, oh my goodness, we were liberated.
They returned to Belgium and the government helped them rebuild their lives. They also reunited with Betty's sister, who was brought back safely.
But there was no word from my father. No letter, no telegram, nothing. I just waited and waited until the waiting became unbearable. So I decided to make the most of my time. I met with American soldiers and went dancing for the next 2 years straight.
It was 1947. Betty was 20 years old, and at this point, she dreamt of a new life. So with $50 in her pocket, she left for America.
I stayed with my uncle in Jamaica, Queens at first. I thought I was entering the land of the free until I saw how black people are treated in America. They were hated and discriminated against. I couldn't believe it. Blind hate was everywhere. I went to night school, learned English, and became a nanny. I met my husband in 1949. We had our daughter, Brenda.
But this man treated her like dirt. This was not Belgium in the 1930s where you had to stay married. Betty would always say,
I left Hitler for this.
So she divorced him and supported her daughter herself. She became laser-focused on her career. She worked at Saks Fifth Avenue selling men's suits for over 36 years. She was the only woman in a sea full of 40 men, and she sold the most product out of any man.
How does she make more sales than any of us?
You know how. She ought to stay where she belongs, at home and in the kitchen.
Some women just don't know their place. What a floozy.
I had to put up with that for 36 years. But I was determined. Hitler didn't stop me, and neither did these men. There are a lot of things to survive in life. And I am a survivor of them all. I am very happy to be here. When I came to America at the age of 20, I was broke and had no education and bad English, so I became a nursemaid for babies. Later on, I went to work at Saks Fifth Avenue and made a good living. I got married and then divorced. I started traveling and loved it. My passion is traveling. So far, I've been to 81 countries and hope to continue. So I am a happy survivor. I have a wonderful daughter and two very talented grandchildren. I am a lucky mother.
Maurice was born in 1923 and grew up in Paris, France. He had a younger brother named Michel and a younger sister named Rachel.
His family kept a strictly kosher home and spoke Yiddish. Maurice loves going on family trips to see the Yiddish movies and theater.
I got to see actors like Molly Pickin and Maurice Schwartz. Growing up in Paris, and I loved my independence.
Whenever Maurice's mom needed food, he would hop on his bright red bike and ride over to the kosher food store to pick it up.
I got to see the entire city on that red bike. It made me feel untouchable. Like I could do anything.
Psst. Maurice's best friend was Paolo. He wasn't Jewish, and it didn't matter at all. They would play soccer together, and Maurice would often eat at Paolo's family restaurant.
Which wasn't a kosher restaurant.
Maurice's childhood in Paris was wonderful, but his feeling of independence would soon change in 1940.
Maurice, I need to tell you something. I'm going to be away for a little while.
Where are you going?
I've decided to enlist in the French army.
What? The army? Why would you do that?
Maurice, it looks like France may need to prepare for a possible invasion from Germany. It's the right thing to do. France needs its men now.
How long will you be gone for?
Not long. I have a feeling the war will be fast, and we are going to win.
But it was not fast. However, enlisting in the army would be the thing that would eventually save his father's life. He would soon be captured and taken as a prisoner of war.
A few days before May 10th, 1940, Paris was informed that Germany would invade.
Children, listen. Here's the plan. Rachel, a neighbor has agreed to take you to their house in the suburbs. You will pass as their daughter, a non-Jew. You will be safe. Michel, the French authority has agreed to take you to a Jewish camp in the center of France. You will be protected. And Maurice?
Madame Bronstein, my family and I are going home in Brittany. We can take Maurice, but I'm afraid we don't have any more room in the car for you.
Thank you, Paulo. Thank you.
But Mama, what about you?
Don't worry about me, Maurice. I'll figure something out.
This was the period of time called the Exodus, where many French people fled. May 10th, 1940, Germany invades France.
I stayed with Paulo and his family in Brittany for about a month. We got word that even though the Germans had invaded, nothing was really happening, so we decided we would return.
Once returning to Paris, Maurice noticed German signs everywhere.
Abandoned populations. Trust the German soldiers. Mama, what do these signs mean?
It's called propaganda. The Germans want to make us believe that the French government has abandoned us and that Germany will come to our rescue.
And despite keeping a somewhat low profile, the Germans did not come to the rescue. In 1941, the roundups of Jews began in France. This was the day things went from being passive to active.
Excuse me, sir. Do you know what's going on?
They're rounding up and arresting all the Jews.
Where are they taking them?
No one knows.
That day, a decision was made. Maurice would leave Paris and escape to Vichy, the non-occupied part of France. His mother said,
Don't worry about me, Maurice. I'll figure something out. What's most important is that you escape.
Maurice's mom connected him with the resistance, which would help him get him into Vichy, France. Once he arrived safely into Vichy, France, Maurice had decided to move to a town called Tarbes. He got a room and started working making tools and dye. It was there that he found out that his mother had been deported. He later received news that she was murdered in Auschwitz.
Don't worry about me, Maurice. I'll be fine. What's most important is that you all escape. I love you.
Maurice just kept going. In 1943, SARs were given out, and the roundups of Jews began again.
I can't stay here. I have to leave.
Once again, Maurice was given instructions from the resistance.
You're gonna take a bus all the way to the town that borders Spain. Keep your eyes open, because once in a while the French police will check your papers, but that's just a risk you have to take. Once you arrive, go to the main hotel and ask for the owner. Tell him you need a guide to help you cross into Spain.
Maurice did as he was instructed. He took a bus to the border of Spain. But once he arrived,
All right, listen up. Once you get off the bus, I will be checking everyone's papers, so have them ready.
Maurice's papers had a bright Jewish star on it.
Rouse! Rouse! Where is he going?
Don't worry about it. He's coming with me. Where are you going?
To that hotel.
Good luck.
and just like that, he was gone. The Nazi German officer made a decision to save his life. To this day, Maurice has never forgotten that moment.
Once arriving to the hotel, there were others waiting to escape into Spain. They were told that once the weather clears up, they would be given instructions.
You will only walk at night, sleep during the day. You will find shacks all over the mountain that store hay for animals. Stay there. The hay will keep you warm. Here is a compass. You must always travel south. If you deviate, you will end up in German-occupied zone. Once you arrive into Spain, you will most likely be arrested, but don't worry, they won't send you back.
Once arriving, Maurice was interviewed by the French, UK, and American authorities. He told them the entire story of escaping.
Once we got to Spain, we were arrested. They were taking us to an incarceration camp, but our bus, it got into a terrible accident. They brought us to a hospital, and once we were ready, they put us on a boat to Casablanca, Morocco, and that's how I ended up here.
Well, that's quite an interesting story, Maurice. As you know, we are in the middle of a war, and we need men.
Yeah, and I want to help. I want to fight.
Maurice, you are only 17. You are not ready for combat yet. Besides, you have other skills we need.
No, I just...
Maurice, we need your skills in repairing our machinery. If our tanks don't work, we don't stand a chance in winning the war.
No, don't you understand? This is the country that killed my mother. They took my home. They destroyed my life. I have to stay. I have to fight. I have to make a change.
Maurice, you will be making change. There are more ways to make change than to fight in a war. Channel your anger and energy into repairing our machinery.
Despite wanting to fight, Maurice obeyed. After 3 months of repairing hundreds of tanks, he turned 18 and was shipped to England and outfitted by the American Army. He joined the 3rd American Army under General Patton, and after training, he was assigned a tank. A month after D-Day, he landed on the beaches of Normandy. There had been 140,000 casualties.
After landing in Normandy, his unit moved towards Paris. After the war, he reunited with his siblings and father. His mother had risked everything, making sure her family was well hidden, a risk that ultimately cost her her own life.
At the end, I realized that there's more than one way of fighting and standing up for what you believe in. It doesn't matter what kind of action you take, as long as you take it. The loss of my mother affected me tremendously, but I persevered. I was not done. There was more life left to be lived. The war is over, and I made it. Back to civilian life. Paris is normalizing, and I am adjusting to it. After receiving communication from my family in the U.S., they suggested I come to the U.S. and would provide the necessary papers. I thought, why not? If it does not work out, I can always go back. But I did not. I got a job, met a wonderful young woman, and we were married at the Concourse Plaza Hotel. We had 2 wonderful daughters, who then provided us with 2 wonderful sons-in-law. Excuse the redundancy, but there are no other words. I have 3 beautiful grandchildren and 1 cute little great-granddaughter. Now, well into my 90s, with my partner Marilyn, I sit back and wonder, where did all the years go?
Belarus, 1938. Clara was born. She was originally the 6th child, but due to illness, 3 of her siblings passed away early. She grew up with an older brother named Aaron and an older sister named Sarah.
Clara was the baby in her family, and she was cherished. Her mother was smart, gentle, and very kind. Her father, who fought in World War I, worked at a farm nearby and was the provider.
In 1941, when Clara was only 3, they got word that the Germans were advancing towards Russia, so they allowed the Jews to leave. At this point, Clara's older brother had already left for college in Moscow.
There were no trains in my city, but we were lucky. We were given a horse. So we loaded up a wagon with many of our possessions in it, hitched it to a horse, and started our journey. When I got tired, I rode on the horse, and sometimes I walked. It took 2 weeks walking on foot before we reached a town that had a train.
Finally, they boarded a train to Uzbekistan.
The train ride took 2 months. I was only 4 at the time, but I remember the constant bombing. The German army was advancing.
Before the bombs would hit, there would always be a warning siren.
Mama would always take me in her arms and run. Then, of course, we would wait for the tracks to get cleaned up before we boarded again. Once the tracks were repaired, we boarded the train. Everything would be fine for a few days, and then...
You get the picture. Every few days this would happen, but finally they arrived in Uzbekistan. The first year was very hard. They put all the refugees in a mosque with no electricity. They had to find ways to entertain themselves. We are all convinced that Clara's imagination helped keep their spirits bright through these years.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the show is starting! The shows would happen at night. It was pitch dark, but someone would bring a lantern, and that was how we found our light. Light makes life lighter. Right, Clara?
Hello, Mr. Butterfly.
Hey, Mr. Bunny.
Wow, I wish I could fly like you.
Well, you know, flying isn't meant for everyone, but I could try to teach you.
I want to fly far, far away from here.
All right. Well, here we go. All right, try hopping on this bush.
Go, Bunny.
And now, you want to spread your ears, flap, and believe you could fly.
Oh, I can't do it.
Try again. Flap your ears
Here,
harder.
try again. Okay. And make sure you believe you want to fly.
I can do it. Oh, I can't do it.
Yes, you can. Try again. Don't give up.
These shows would happen multiple times a week for an entire year. Despite families living on top of each other and hardly having any food, these evening performances allowed a time for everyone to exercise their imagination.
Maybe just for those few moments, we could all forget about the reality of our situation. We let our imaginations take us far, far away from here.
1 year later, Clara and her family moved into a house made of clay and straw. They had no toilets or running water. Clara's mother found work at a farm, and they would pay her with food, which they all desperately needed. Her father found work fixing shoes for the locals, and Clara would help with the translations.
I remember starting kindergarten. That's where I met my friend Mary.
Mary and Clara learned the language of Uzbek with ease. They were both Jewish, spoke Russian, and were refugees. Once again, Clara's imagination helped her get through these rough times.
Take my hand, little bird. It's time to fly. Wow, we can see so many things from up here.
Flying is the best feeling in the world. No one can catch us.
We are free. We are free. But now we must find the perfect place to land.
Oh, look, there's a sandbox. Let's land there.
Your Highness, well, hello.
Hello to you too, Your Highness. May I offer you a cup of tea?
How did you know that was exactly what I wanted?
Because everyone loves tea.
Queen Mary, I just adore your crown. How many diamonds are on it?
Oh, you know, just a few. 500 billion! And how many diamonds are in your crown?
Not many, just 300 trillion too.
We are so rich!
Every day, their imaginations would take them far away, so for at least a few minutes, they could forget about their hunger, forget about their sickness, and forget about the life they had left behind. In these moments, they could transform their reality. They were no longer refugees. They were royal queens. They were birds that had all the freedom in the world.
Outside of my imagination, back at home, my family didn't know if my brother was dead or alive. He was in Moscow when the war broke out, living with my cousins. We received a telegram that both of my cousins had been killed, but didn't mention anything about my brother. All we could do was hope that he survived.
May 9th, 1945, Victory Day. The war was finally over. Everyone was in the streets celebrating.
My mother had found red fabric and sewn dresses for my sister and I to wear that day. I'll never forget it. A red dress with white polka dots. Never had we felt so fancy.
In September of 1945, Clara and her family went back to Belarus. They found out her brother had survived. But their home had been destroyed. They found shelter in a home that had the least damage. But while conditions continued to be rough, there was still little food, and Clara got sick with typhoid and was hospitalized for months. But ultimately, she came back strong.
A few months later, we moved into a home without floors and windows without glass. We started from scratch.
There still wasn't much food, but the entire next year they saved flour so that they could make matzah for their first Passover. They had the only working wood oven, so everyone brought their flour together and they made matzah.
Shebechol Halelot, Anu Ochlim Chametz Umatzah, Chametz Umatzah, Halayla Hazeh, Halayla Hazeh, Kulo Matzah, Halayla Hazeh, Halayla Hazeh, Kulo Matzah.
From here, we rebuilt our lives, which took a long time. I still believe it was my imagination and my ability to find the light that has helped me to persevere and to find love even in the darkest of moments.
Now you have seen the very beginning of my life, but my whole life was ahead of me with most happy moments. School, college, early marriage, giving birth to my daughter, and in 5 years to my then red-headed son. Now he is 55 and gray-headed. Emigration. After escaping the anti-Semitic Russia and coming to United States in 1980, we started a new life, ready to work as hard as needed. My now late husband and myself working in engineering companies. The children went to school and college and later graduated from NYU and Columbia University, making master's degree and starting long-lasting jobs. Also, a very important part of my life, God blessed me with 2 now grown-up grandchildren, a grandson and granddaughter who has recently got her PhD in mathematics. For past 4 years since my retirement, I have been traveling, seeing the world and our beautiful country, attending theaters, museums, hiking, volunteering. Yes, I retired from my job, but I didn't retire from life. Life is beautiful. A witness theater with the wonderful students and talented adults is one of many proof of it. Also, I'm hopeful that the dark past will never come back. I believe in the bright future for all of us. Thank you.
An outsider. That's how I always felt. I have never been able to find my chair, and it has haunted me all my life.
Freddie's parents and his two older brothers, Rudy and Horst, lived in Breslau, Germany. After Kristallnacht, they realized that they needed to leave Germany as soon as possible. So they applied to the Jewish National Fund for help to purchase tickets to China, the only country not requiring any visas to enter.
On Shabbat, they received a telegram in shul saying that they found enough money for 3 people to go to Shanghai, China.
I wasn't born yet, but I was always told that my paternal grandparents said,
We fought in World War I. Germany wouldn't dare do anything to us. Plus, Shanghai? We'd rather die in the gutter than go to Shanghai. It's the sewer of the world.
But this was the only city that had no government, and you didn't need a passport or visa to enter. They decided to make other plans for Rudy, Freddie's oldest brother.
Rudy, dear, we could only get 3 tickets. So for now, you'll have to stay with your Uncle Max in Berlin. You see, Rudy, Uncle Max is married to a non-Jew, and mixed marriages are protected from persecution by the Nazis. Remember Uncle Joe in America? Eventually, he will send you a visa to come to America, and we'll see each other again there. I'm sorry, Rudy. We just don't have the money for us all to go now. But you will be safe in Berlin, and we will meet back up in America. You'll see.
6 months later, they arrived in Shanghai in April 1939.
When Freddie's parents arrived in Shanghai, they found out there was a community of 17,000 wealthy Sephardic Jews. The Sephardim had transformed the warehouses into refugee camps. The refugees were fed by a makeshift community kitchen. The menu was rice and beans on a steady basis.
Except Likvot Shabbos, when they changed the menu to beans and rice. 2 years later, Freddie was born. After the war erupted and the Japanese invaded, they turned the area.
we shared a room with 28 other people. Our corner of the room was 5 by 6 feet, separated from our neighbor with just a curtain.
Surprisingly, there was a synagogue in the middle of the ghetto, which gave the refugees a sense of bonding with other Jews and a chance to communicate with Hashem.
In 6 years, I went to 5 schools, always moving and changing. It made me feel like I was never settled, like I could never finish what I started.
On August 6th, 1945, Freddie's mother swore that she felt a rush of cool wind in the air. It was the day the Americans dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima. A month later, the war ended, and people started leaving immediately.
Mr. Seidel, I'm from the Red Cross. We're going around collecting names of relatives you want information on. There's been an enormous genocide. We're trying to help collect information on people's whereabouts.
My father gave him the names of my older brother Rudy, my paternal grandparents, my father's brothers, and other family members who had stayed behind.
A year later, the Red Cross came back and posted a huge sign on a street corner with all the names of the requested relatives. His mother and father were murdered in Treblinka. Rudy, his oldest son, who he left behind, murdered in Auschwitz. And 18 other family members, all murdered.
From this moment on, my father lost his sense of humor, his playfulness, and a huge part of himself.
Freddie wasn't able to understand that his older brother had been murdered until he recited the blessing after the meal on Shabbos.
To this day, Freddie thinks about Rudy.
What was it like for him to be alone, completely alone, and walking into the gas chamber? Did someone put their arm around him and say, "Come, my boy, I'll take care of you. Everything will be all right. Don't worry"? When they divided the strong boys from the weak, which one was he? I hope he was one of the strong boys. I wonder whether he died in protest.
After the war, Freddie and his family wanted to leave Shanghai, but the options were not ideal, so they stayed. But in 1952, HIAS, a Jewish organization, gave them more options to choose from.
You can either go to Palestine or back to Germany. The German government is eager to bring back its German Jews. They will even give you startup money.
If we go to Palestine, you and Freddie will be drafted into the army. I already lost one son. I just can't handle losing another person in my life. Let's go back to Germany.
So we went back to Germany. My parents thought it was the best decision, especially considering the government would help us start up.
But when they returned, they didn't qualify because Breslau was no longer a German city.
So we moved to Berlin, Germany when I was 11. But I was in complete culture shock. All I ever knew was Shanghai. I had never heard of Christians or of Jesus.
Teachers would ask to shake his hand, but Freddie would refuse because it was unsanitary in China. He was put in a class with second graders when he should have been in 6th grade. There were not many Jews in Germany at this time, and often he would be asked,
Hey, Uncle Freddie, where are your horns?
Why do people hate you?
Why don't you eat pork? It's so good.
Why did Hitler hate the Jews?
Why don't you believe in Jesus?
How did you survive Hitler?
In Germany, I didn't know who I could trust, who were the Nazis, and who were the ones who helped the Jews. Everybody claimed they lost someone, but you never knew.
I had a neighbor who went to Auschwitz.
I was against Hitler the entire time, really.
I never had a problem with any Jews before.
My mother's friend's sister's neighbor was killed in one of the camps. I think.
So, Uncle Freddie, you were born in the Shanghai ghetto? How interesting.
How interesting!
Stop! It's not interesting. There is nothing interesting about it.
This is always the way people respond when hearing about Freddie's life. Interesting. But it wasn't interesting. It was painful, disorienting, and chaotic. Freddie and his parents stayed in Germany for 7 years. In 1958, Freddie's brother sponsored Freddie and his parents to come to America.
But even in America, Freddie felt like an outsider. He felt out of place, like he could never find his chair.
But Freddie does have a chair with us. And once he sat in it, he taught us many important things.
He especially taught us what it means to be a refugee, what it feels like to not have a home, to be displaced.
He taught us how to have compassion for others and to try to understand how they may be feeling.
He taught us that being a refugee can and does impact your entire life, and that you have to work extra hard to create the life you imagine.
Freddie, there'd be something missing from this group if you weren't a part of it. Thank you for your story and the wonderful lessons you've taught us.
Hi. 78 years and 6 days ago, I was born in Shanghai on May 1st, 1941. Because of all the parades that were being held in Shanghai, I thought I was a special event. And it took quite some time for my parents to convince me that these parades were not in my honor, but because it was May Day, Labor Day, in most of the rest of the world. But nevertheless, I put Shanghai on the map. I would like to share with you some of the responses that I get when people find out that I was born in Shanghai, and also the feelings that I have when I get these responses. One of the responses quite frequently is, were your parents there too? And I facetiously say, no, my mother made a contract with UPS to drop me off over there. And then 6 months later, my parents would come to Shanghai and follow me. Another one is, funny, you don't look Chinese. And I think to myself, funny, you don't look, you fill in the blanks. And of course, the big one is, how interesting. Interesting, my foot. If you are like Ed Norton, of the Honeymooners, who used to live in the sewer, then it was interesting, but I wasn't Ed Norton. I didn't enjoy living in the sewer, especially the world's greatest sewer. The sanitation conditions and hygiene in Shanghai were terrible at the time. 1,500 refugees died of the diseases they contracted because of the poor conditions and the sanitation and hygiene. I also have a problem in that I incorporate many cultures within me. First, the Oriental and Chinese culture, then the German culture, the Christian culture, the American culture, and of course, most of all, the Jewish culture. Any wonder that I'm discombobulated or crazy? We now have a problem in this country, and actually it's throughout the world. So what else is new, right? The problem is that today, intolerance has been morphed into hate crimes, violent hate crimes, not just for Jewish people, but for people of all faith, and all houses of worship are under attack. I would like to share with you some of my experiences that I thought of when I became a member of this fantastic theater. Shortly after 9/11, I went to the Summer Olympics in Sydney, Australia. And of course, on Shabbos, I wanted to go to the synagogue, and I went to the main synagogue in downtown Sydney. And I got there, and the gates were closed, and there was a sign, please go around the block to the back entrance and join us there. So I went around the block, and of course, there were 3 young gentlemen in civilian clothes standing there welcoming me and wishing me a good Shabbos. And then they asked me where I was from, and who the rabbi was, and what synagogue I attended, and who the rabbi was there. And it didn't occur to me at the time, but they were vetting me. And after a few more questions, they finally gave me the green light and let me enter the synagogue. And what a smart, unobtrusive way to vet people if they are dangerous. A few years later, I was in Jerusalem, and I wanted to go to a drugstore, also again in the center of the city. And as I approached the drugstore, there was a long line of people outside the drugstore, mostly women. And it turned out there was an elderly man, again in civilian clothes, looking inside every bag and then letting the people into the drugstore. Nobody complained, everybody was complacent. Everybody agreed that it's better to be safe than sorry. Then later on, I went to see the Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City. You can tell I like Olympics, right? And there they had about 20 to 30 metal detectors. And nobody complained because it was shortly after 9/11. And all the people got in a little bit late, but everybody got in and there was nothing happening in the venue. And in Berlin, the big synagogue, the police also have a metal detector before you enter. And there are some apparently Israeli security people who also stand outside to make sure that you're really Jewish before they let you enter. So these are some of the suggestions we may possibly use right now when things are getting really terrible for us. And some people may not like that they have to be worshiping under such conditions, but isn't it better to be safe than to be sorry? I have a friend who was 30 years on the police force in New York. His name is Robert Satz. And he retired about 10 years ago. And he said to me, you know something, Freddie? Nothing deters a bad man with a gun more than a good man with a gun. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming and thank you for listening. I am Freddie K. Seidel, K for Q. Good night.
Carries so much more than just the painful baggage of their lives.
It carries their gifts.
It carries what we love about them.
It carries Clara's light and imagination.
It carries Betty's feministic strength.
It carries Maurice's sense of purpose and fight.
It carries Gaston's sense of community.
It carries Freddie's determination to make the world kinder.
It carries Hannah-Laura's love for family.
It carries Anna's strength to overcome.
These stories carry all of us, and we hope that they carry you too.